All right. Welcome everyone to session 2A, RDM Instruction 1. This is a Zoom webinar, so attendees are muted and your cameras are turned off. So to ask a question, please use the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. This session will run from Eastern Time, 1:45 to 2:45. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. That was Central Time. That's what I'm on. This session will run from 2:45 to 3:45 with about 15 minutes left at the very end for Q&A. This session will include one live presentation followed by 4 pre-recorded lightning talks. And you'll be able to ask questions from presenters of both the live and the recorded lightning talks at the end. When you do so, as you are asking questions, please indicate which presenter or presenters you would like to direct your particular question to, and we will save all questions until the end of the session. So after the session, please feel free to drop questions and continue the conversation in the session chat in FeedLoop. Don't forget that the Research Data Access and Preservation Summit organizers are committed to providing an environment where all attendees can participate fully in the program and activities without fear of harassment or discriminatory behavior of any kind. There is a code of conduct helper available during this session, and you may direct questions to them in FeedLoop. You can see that on FeedLoop if you need assistance. Okay, so let's get started with our presentations. I'm just going to put also the shared notes document that we have been working in all day in the chat here as well. Okay, so we have our first presentation is, I just lost the... I have the speakers. Okay, good. I have the speakers, but I don't have the name of the...
We can just introduce ourselves if that works for you.
Yeah, that would be great. Awesome.
Okay.
I'll let you all take it away.
Okay, so I'm Lena. I'm the Senior Data Management and Research Impact Librarian for Northwell Health, and I'm here with my colleagues Regina Vidiello, who's one of our other librarians, and Mike Kelly, who's the Director of Learning and Organizational Development. And Northwell Health is a large hospital system in the New York City area, just to give you some context of where we're coming from. And as it says on the tin, we're going to talk about a statistics microlearning course that we developed together with the health professionals in our hospitals.
Hi, so this is to open with microlearning and a little background on what microlearning is and how it supports this project. So a great way to think of microlearning is learning delivered in short and focused bites. And you know, the idea of microlearning ties in with the idea that we can lose information over time after we first learned it. And this is Hermann Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve, where the percent of the amount of information that we can recall decreases over time, depending on learners. And you can see that here in this little graph. As time goes on, knowledge retention decreases. However, if you re-expose learners to the same kind of information or information as a part of a series, they actually recall it much better, and there's less time it takes to recall. It's also practical for people who are balancing work and life to have these smaller chunks of learning occur over a period of time. Characteristics of microlearning are modules are short, so the bites are quick. They can be scheduled and maintain focus a little bit easier. They're usually self-directed, where students can learn at their own pace, maybe even on a mobile device. And students get more moments of accomplishment because they get through tinier chunks quicker. And students can spread out and revisit learning bites, which also makes it easier for educators to update individualized sessions. Micro-learning is also characterized as being granular, so each module has one learning objective, and students can navigate to find the content that they need, so that one objective. Learners can select the learning bites that are most relevant to their role, so they don't have to watch everything. And students can immediately apply what they learn from a micro-learning bite. And, the idea of microlearning isn't new. We've had this in, different forms for many years, and checklists. Even why we write phone numbers the way we do is it's much easier to recall small chunks of information than one long stream of it. YouTube how-to videos are often broken up into playlists. Word of the day calendars. I don't know if anyone had one of those back in the day, but it would be the idea that you learned little bits of vocabulary over the course of a year. And even phishing test emails that you might get from IT. It's the idea that you get tested on some concepts over the course of several months. Some examples of microlearning that make the most of today's technology are things like software, flashcard software for memorizing content at different spaced repetition, short videos in a series, an email feed that sends you targeted learning content, mobile phone quizzes, podcasts, infographics, and a scrolling web page where students could scroll at their own pace to the content that they need.
Okay, so now I'm going to present this section on with how we designed our course now that Regina set up the theoretical background. So we started on the process of creating this course due to feedback from a survey of residents in the Northwell hospital system. The survey flagged the need for additional support on biostatistics for resident research. The residents are increasingly being asked to do research and publish papers all throughout the system of hospitals, but they tend to struggle with statistical analysis. Many of our residents have taken a statistics course in undergrad or medical school, but have never applied their knowledge to actual research projects. Because of this survey, the head of the Office of Academic Affairs at the hospital asked our library director to work on ways to increase our statistical support for residents. And then subsequently, she passed the mandate on to me, and hence the idea for an asynchronous online course was born. Sorry. So in order to bring the course to fruition, we needed a team with complementary skill sets. I'm the data librarian for the system, so my work overlapped with data analysis and statistics support. Regina is one of the hospital librarians, and she also used to work as a scientist, and therefore she had a good sense of the most necessary statistical tests for our medical scientist researchers. And she knew from her work with the residence programs where the knowledge gaps were. Mike works for the Office of Data Strategy, and he had been tasked with creating programs to increase data literacy for Northwell system employees. Mike had the most experience with creating e-learning courses, and he knew how to create good example videos, so we really relied on his knowledge of e-learning when we were designing the course. So with the team assembled, we first needed to decide on a course structure that would work for our target population. When picturing our target student, we decided they would be a busy resident who had probably taken a statistics course before, but had never applied their knowledge. Our target audience was busy and would want just-in-time learning that would be available immediately when they needed it. Therefore, we decided that the course would be asynchronous and would not require the students to go through the videos in order. Students could jump around between the pages as needed. And we also knew we needed to include enough information to make doing statistics possible, but not overwhelm them. We needed to structure the course to include examples that would be immediately applicable to the residents' research. Often, residents use EHR data for their first research project, So we decided that the examples in our course would use EHR-style data. Finally, we decided that the course would live on an internal SharePoint page. Northwell uses SharePoint for its intranet, so this platform would be already familiar to our students. As we designed this course, we gradually realized that the information we were putting together was relevant not just for residents, but for most types of novice researchers throughout the health system, including nurses, physician assistants, and pharmacists. We eventually decided to try to market the course more broadly than just to the residents and fellows. Having decided on the structure of the course, we moved to creating a more detailed outline of the pages we would include. On this slide, you can see a screenshot of the final course as shown on Northwell's website. On the right is the navigation between the different pages. We decided that the videos and examples included on the course would be done in GraphPad Prism, which is a statistical analysis and visualization software. GraphPad Prism is provided to the residents by the library free of charge, so it made sense for us to use it in the course. Our outline structured the pages of the course into two sections, general information and statistical tests. General information covered background on doing statistical analysis and how to download and use GraphPad Prism. In the statistical test section, we devoted one page to each test we had decided to include. To generate the list of statistical tests to include, we came up with a draft between us of common tests, and then we got feedback from the director of the biostatistics unit at Northwell. So skipping ahead for a moment, I also wanted to touch on the outreach and promotion we did for this course once it was available. Because we partnered with the Office of Academic Affairs for this course, they sent out the information on the new course to all of the residents and residency directors. Additionally, we created a flyer to hang up in the hospital buildings and to hand out at any tabling events we did. The biostatistics unit also turned out to be really important partners in promoting the course, and they decided to mention it when they do workshops for the residents. Finally, whenever someone requests access to GraphPad Prism from the library, I send them a link to the course as part of their onboarding.
All right, I'll just talk real briefly about how we created the videos and specifically what types of data sets that we used. It was important, I think, for our students that they have data that was in context to what our course objectives were. And so we wanted to provide healthcare data. And if you've looked at any of the other statistics courses that are online, and there are a lot of them, they tend to look at data sets that have to do with anything from sports scores to climate data to housing and demographic types of data. So we wanted to create these courses in a healthcare environment and provide actual healthcare data. So let me show you some of the common sources that I use for these types of examples. The first one is a fairly comprehensive source. It's used when you want to have a full spectrum of electronic health record data. The nice thing about this data source is that the data is 100% synthesized. So it's not just de-identified data from some data source, but it's completely computer generated. It's an application called Cynthia. It's written in Java. You can download it and you can either run it yourself, as I did, and generate your own data sets, or they have a very large data set sitting in an Amazon data container, and you can just link to that and use your own compute resources to query that data. So the basic premise behind it is that it has a bunch of disease models, and it will create patients with records across their lifetime if they were to have that particular disease. So, if it picks something like diabetes, it may have, 20 years of encounters, allergies, pharmaceutical records, lab results, vital signs, et cetera, in the database. And it just generates that all randomly. But it gives it a very, succinct and cohesive record for what would be a normal patient. For my database, I just made it common to Northwell. So I generated 100 patients in the New York area. I kept their ages between 24 and 90. And I use this data set for things like machine learning and SQL querying and things like that. So this is one data source that I use. The second data source is very common. It's on the website Kaggle. Kaggle is a database that sets up different types of competitions. So if you're a data scientist, for example, you could go to Kaggle. There are thousands of companies that go to Kaggle and set up these competitions to help them improve their business by having data scientists in the community generate models on their data. And they have cash prizes and things like that. But they publish these data sets publicly, and there are many different healthcare data sets available. So if you want a fairly simple data set, this is a great place to go. I went here, for example, for the length of stay data that I used in the statistics course that we're talking about here today. So I have that link at the bottom if you're interested in that. And then the final data set is just generically, go ahead, Lena, to the next slide, please. Thanks. Is on Google itself. They have a whole subsection of their site dedicated to data sets. And so you can query it like you're just querying anything in Google. Query healthcare data, for example, in my case, and it will just give you a list specifically of data sets that you can download in the same way that it gives you search results on anything else. So these are 3 really good resources that you can use if you're looking for data to practice on or use in courses or anything else. The last thing I'll mention is just some how we produce the videos, and then I'll show some statistics really quickly. So if you're doing any kind of video production, I just mentioned some of the tools I used. I used OBS Studio to do the screen recordings. As Lena mentioned, we used Prism for the software, and then I just recorded my screen with a voiceover doing those demonstrations. Microsoft PowerPoint also has a screen capture utility if you have the Microsoft tools. And also Camtasia Studio is another paid for utility that's very popular and robust for recording your screen. The final output I mentioned at the bottom there, I used the HD format, which is the resolution of the screen. I recorded it, or I encoded it in the MP4 format at a bit rate of 2.5 megabits, which is probably a little overkill, but when you upload to SharePoint or YouTube or any of the other services, they're going to re-encode it anyway for a variable bit rate type of format, and they're going to take care of all that. So I tend to give it more than it needs so that it can recompress it and keep it in a very high quality type of format. So that's the encoding format that I use. And if you have any questions on that, feel free to post those, and I'll be happy to answer those at the end. Final slide is just some of the statistics about the course itself. One of the nice things about SharePoint is you can just click on any of your pages and get the analytics right off of them. So fairly recently, as you can see, we've had about a little over 1,000 total viewers across all the pages in the course. It's been fairly popular amongst our researchers, and we've been excited to have a good amount of traffic of viewers going through the course. And I mentioned our most popular test is the linear regression test, as you might imagine, but we're getting a fairly good amount of traffic across all the different videos. And as we mentioned, it's a micro learning environment, so you can just pick and choose what you want to learn. You don't have to go through it from start to finish. Lena, do you want the last word on this?
Yeah, thanks for coming to our presentation, and we'll be happy to take questions at the end.
Excellent. Thank you, Regina, Lena, and Michael for your presentation. We will move on to the lightning talks. The first one up is from Christy Briney at Caltech on extending one-shot RDM instruction, creating a workbook of data management exercises to supplement data information literacy sessions.
Lisa, just a note, we'll be playing the
all of
lightning
them?
talk back to back. So I don't know if you want to introduce the others too.
Yes, absolutely. And then we have Sophia Lafferty-Hess, who is at Duke University, and she will be talking about developing specialized data curation trainings, a community-driven approach. And then we have Marla Hertz. And we do not have them on the list of speakers, but taking FAIR on the road, presenting professional development workshops on RDM at STEM conferences. And then our last lightning round talk is by Colby Wood and Tobin Michael. And they are at Northwestern University, and they will be speaking on teaching interoperability, how we make Git and GitHub approachable to all.
Hi, my name is Kristen Briney. I'm the biology librarian at Caltech, and I'm here today to talk to you about creating a workbook of data management exercises to extend one-shot research data management instruction. So before I get into that, I want to tell you one important thing about Caltech, and it's that we're small. You may have heard us as this very research-intensive university. We are, but we do that with about 300 faculty. We have about 2,000 students, not including postdocs, and we're very small. So for data services, this means the library can do a lot of hands-on support, but on the flip side, it means we don't do a lot of work at scale because there's very little scale to be had. So one of the challenging things that I've been dealing with and thinking about a lot is how do I provide comprehensive data management education when I'm really limited to one-shot instruction? I get an hour with a few classes a year, with a few programs a year, and a couple workshops, and that's it. So I've been struggling with how to bridge the lecture, an hour of lecture, into actually implementing data management in those researchers' laboratories. So I had an aha moment over the summer, and I realized worksheets. Previous to the summer, I developed maybe 4 or so different handouts and worksheets, and I realized I could just extend that. I could extend the number of worksheets I have across the entire data lifecycle. And these worksheets would help people bridge the RDM lecture and actual implementation in the lab. And so the worksheets themselves, the researchers can do them on their own. They'd be structured, reproducible, and useful to implement a discrete data management task. So I have this whole collection of worksheets. I realized this is a workbook. And so I ended up with 15 different exercises in the workbook across the entire data lifecycle. There are 7 of them are based wholly in part on worksheets I had before, and 8 of them are entirely new. 9 of these worksheets are answer the question in the space provided type of worksheets. I have 4 checklists, mostly for data sharing and project wrap-up, and a pair of procedures. Altogether, this creates the Research Data Management Workbook. It's available online under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial license, so feel free to use it, feel free to remix it, just don't sell it. You can access the workbook at the friendly URL library.caltech.edu/RDM workbook. You can also download a PDF and EPUB copy from our repository. It's stable and citable with the DOI listed here. I want to keep this book as a live book, as something that will be updated over time. So please let me know if you use these exercises and you hate them, if you love them, if there are typos, and give me feedback so I can keep this up to date. The online version, the HTML version, will be updated more frequently, and then I'll spin off stable editions in the repository. Before I get into how I actually use the workbook for teaching, I want to say a quick note about the tool that I use to create the book, and it's called Bookdown. It's really, really great. So I started with a template for Bookdown in RStudio, and it comes with a whole bunch of files, several of which are individual Markdown files for each chapter. And you basically write your text and you use Markdown to format the text. And then when it comes time to actually make the book, there's literally a build button build book button in RStudio. You press that and Bookdown takes care of all the pagination, the table contents, the entire book formatting, and spits out a PDF, an EPUB, and an HTML. It's really, really great. Because I did this in RStudio, I had integrated version control with Git and backup with GitHub. And when it came time for hosting, I'm actually using GitHub Pages for hosting. And it literally involved changing the name of the output folder and pressing a button in GitHub. And voila, my book was online in 5 minutes. It was really great. Finally, how do I use this for teaching? Well, for an hour-long class, I usually work through one exercise, maybe two. So for the most part, we're working through the file naming conventions exercise. It's my favorite. It's award-winning. It's great. I love working through this exercise. So I have a whole bunch of exercises that we don't have time to get to, and I assign these for homework after the lecture. For the classes and the programs I teach for, I really don't have the authority to assign them. But it's more me saying, okay, here's this topic. I'm going to tell you all about it. And if you want to implement this topic, start with this exercise. So it gives them a place to start. For large classes, and by Caltech, I mean 50 to 60 people, that's large for us. So the Responsible Conduct of Research series, for example, I actually print out the workbook so they actually get a copy to take home with them and they can look at it and refer to it later. Otherwise, there are 2 versions online that I can refer to have people look at the workbook. What's been really surprising is how useful the workbook has been for consultations in addition to teaching. So what happens is somebody will email me a question about data management and we'll schedule a consultation. And before we actually get to the consultation, I'll send them resources and particular exercises to look through. And this gives us a really nice shared foundation for understanding how to potentially address the problem. And it really is nice for kind of having a starting point. And they don't actually have to work through the exercise, but they'll get a sense of how I plan to guide them through the problem. So that's all I have time for today. I would love to take your questions. I also have a question for you, and it's, how do you extend beyond one-shot instruction? What do you do to make the most of a 1 hour? And I would love to hear from you and what other people have done with this frustrating problem. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Sophia Lafferty-Hess, and I'm a research data management consultant at Duke University Libraries. And in this lightning talk, I'm going to share out about a data curation network project sponsored by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, focused on developing new specialized data curation trainings. Just to say a little bit more about the Data Curation Network, or DCN. DCN is a member-funded and led network of 17 academic and 2 nonprofit data repositories that advance open research through shared curation and an active community of practice. The DCN is based out of the University of Minnesota. Within the DCN, we have been engaging with the community through education and training since 2017. Our initial phase of education, which was also supported by an IMLS grant and was led by Cynthia Hudson-Vitale, used the curated framework to conceptualize the curation of data. The trainings included peer-to-peer discussions, hands-on activities, and a capstone project where participants developed a primer, which is a quick start guide for curating a particular file format or data type. Since 2017, we have held 6 in-person workshops and engaged with more than 250 data professionals through in-person and online trainings. Pictured on this slide are some of the numerous groups that have completed the training. So building on these foundational concepts and framework, over the past 2 years, the DCN has been working on a new project to expand our curriculum for 4 specific data types, including geospatial data, scientific images, code, and simulations. We also had a goal, when appropriate, to consider the ethical, equitable, and accessible considerations for that data type. We chose these types because they were the types we see most often submitted to the DCN for shared curation. Our approach for this project was to bring together cohorts to facilitate knowledge sharing and the expansion of curation resources. So essentially what we did was we had a call for participation in fall 2022 for individuals interested in being part of a team that would really work together on the development of these new curriculum materials for those data types. And each team also had a mentor who was a member of our core project design team, which helped connect the work going on across the different cohorts. So on the previous slide, I showed kind of an abstract version of our cohort approach, but what really made this project successful from my perspective was the people. So we held a kickoff meeting in DC in January 2023 to help establish relationships, build a shared understanding of our goals, and really just create that structure to complete our work. And then in October of 2023, we brought together all the cohorts as well as 15 other archive and library professionals to test out the new curriculum materials during a 2-day in-person pilot workshop at Duke University. Each cohort was given around 2.5 to 3 hours to teach the materials of their choosing. And then we gathered feedback from the cohorts, and then they used that feedback to refine the materials. So I did want to briefly share one of the quotes we got through the feedback that said, for me, this workshop showcased the DCN's unique position and ability to bring experienced practitioners and novice curators together in a joint learning experience and to advance the tools, techniques, and principles of data curation. So thank you. So while we do see DCN, as a hub to bring together people, who I really want to thank are all those folks that did the hard work to develop these materials. So thank you to Wanda, Elle, Heather, Fernando, Guillerme, Seth, Greg, Nick, Talia, KP, Megan, Mariah, Amy, Sarah, Paul, Jennifer, Leighton, Kelly, Tim, and Melinda. Without you, none of this would have been possible. So to wrap up with our next steps, we will be openly sharing the materials that we generated as part of this project. We're hoping to have everything published this spring, and they'll be shared out via both the DCN GitHub repository, where we host the DCN primers, as well as archive versions within the University of Minnesota's Digital Conservancy institutional repository. So right now, the project team is also currently exploring future opportunities to provide these trainings and to continue to work together to expand curation resources. So thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, I look forward to engaging in the Q&A, or you can feel free to reach out to me directly at sophia.lafferty.hess@duke.edu.
Hi, I'm Marla Hertz, the Research Data Management Librarian at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, and I'm excited to talk to you today about presenting professional development workshops on research data management topics at STEM conferences. So the main point of this talk is to address the question of how do we reach out to the researchers that need our services, but either don't realize it or don't know that we exist. So my call to action to you is to go where the researchers go when you're thinking about programming and outreach. I've got a list of options for outreach, many of which you're likely already taking advantage of. And I'm going to focus today on the last one, attending and presenting at professional conferences, specifically not library or data-focused conferences, but the conferences that cater towards researchers. And essentially, I'm asking you to get out of your comfort zone to reap these benefits. So for you, there's a captive audience, a networking opportunity, and it's a time to take a deep dive and learn the trends and realities of a discipline. There's also benefits for the attendee. It's a unique programming opportunity for them, and it's also a great way to make the attendees aware of analogous services at their home institution. So as an example, I'm going to share my experiences presenting at a professional development conference for postdoctoral fellows. I was at the National ERACTA meeting last year. And ERACTA is an NIH fellowship program with a diversity-driven mission to train research and teaching faculty, and it serves students from groups that are underrepresented in biomedical research. So if you're interested in learning more about the program, do check out their website. And full disclosure, I am an alumna of the program, so I reached out to the conference organizers and asked if I could come present at the next ERACTA meeting, and they agreed. So this is a picture of me outside of the lecture room with my poster board. My title was chaos to clarity, creating effective research data management plans. And then the larger picture here is an action shot of me conducting the workshop. This was a 90-minute workshop on preparing NIH data management plans, and I emphasized data standards and identifying appropriate data repositories during this session. The attendees filled out a worksheet for their project, and the slides from this conference and all of the worksheets that I developed are available at this link and QR code below if you're interested in using those for your own workshops. The presentation itself was quite well received. I had about 20 attendees from the over 200 people that were at the conference. So aside from the presentation itself, it's important to really maximize your time at a conference. So at the ERACTA conference, I served as a judge for the poster session. I also was able to serve on a career development panel. So that's what's pictured up here. And I was always networking at meals and in between sessions, talking up the library. And hopefully, so I've convinced you that it's a good idea to go to one of these types of conferences. And the next question you might have is, which one should I attend? There's two main conference types, discipline-specific and professional development conferences. I've listed a couple of examples below, and I've included a QR code to a Google Sheet, which is, I've listed out several professional development conferences catering to different groups, especially ones from minoritized groups in STEM. And I encourage you to take a look at these and also add to it so we can continue to grow this resource. Once you pick an organization that you're interested in, then there's lots of different ways to get involved. So professional organizations often have webinar series and are always on the lookout for speakers. You could also attend a local or regional meeting or attend an annual national or international. Lastly, I want to leave you with some tips to secure a presentation slot. One is to contact the organizers directly. If you haven't attended this conference before, you may also want to speak to past attendees or organizers to help match the proposal to the audience. You could also consider submitting a proposal with a co-author in the field. That's going to make sure that you don't have to do it alone, and then you can also, it also helps them raise your profile. And lastly, you can take advantage of your network like I did in order to secure this. So with that, I hope you'll consider outreach to these professional development organizations, and I look forward to your questions at the end of this session.
Hello, my name is Colby Wither-Upwood. I'm joined by my colleague Tobin Magley. We work at Northwestern University in IT, research, computing, and data services. Today, we're going to talk about a workshop that we developed for research groups. And our workshop is about how you can use the basic functions of Git from the GitHub web point-and-click interface. So, and this is without any installations. We're setting up any complicated security protocols. So we're going to talk about why we teach this. The second time we taught this was the same day that RDAP announced the theme for this year's summit, interoperability. And as soon as I got that email, I said to Tobin, that's what we're doing. We are teaching interoperability to research groups. And we knew we had to apply. So thank you very much for accepting our talk. For research groups, Git and GitHub are very popular tools. Git is a version control system that was originally written for the command line. GitHub is a website where you can post those Git repos and you can share your code and documentation and collaborate with others on your team. Git originally was written for the command line, but it's now available within RStudio, VS Code, and other IDEs. They've always had a pretty good desktop app, and they have an ever-improving website interface. Now, the issues with teaching Git from the command line to everyone, number one is that there is a lot of jargon. So you have to start by teaching all of this jargon, including words that mean almost the same thing, but not the same thing, and explaining what the risks are of using different commands. It's also a pretty tough installation on some machines, honestly, a lot of machines. So we've had that when we've taught on the command line. And they've also implemented some pretty tough security protocols last year. And these are much needed protocols to keep our code and data safe, but they can be hard to set up on machines. I'm going to talk about two research groups where we've taught the workshop. And these are very different research groups, but they both required us to help them with that interoperability. So the first is a business school lab made up of faculty, staff, and students that also brings in about a dozen postbacks each year for a one-year internship. The postbacks are taught R during their first weeks, but there's no time to have them to teach them command line Git. They need to be able to get up and running on code right away, including code that they're inheriting that is on GitHub. Postbacks are also assigned school laptops that get passed down to different people from year to year, which complicates those security protocols. The second group is a medical school department that has faculty, students, research staff, and admin staff with a wide range of coding languages and skill levels, including non-coding staff who still need to be able to collaborate on documentation that's stored on GitHub and maintain code from publications from people who may have moved on to other institutions. Also, some members in the medical school department have closed or restricted laptops.
So the problem that both of these research groups are facing is that they are in groups that need to collaborate with each other, but that have different computational skill sets. Specifically, all the members needed to learn how to collaborate on GitHub. As anybody who has taught Git before knows, teaching Git is hard, not only because the content can be confusing, but also because the setup and configuration of Git leads to a lot of troubleshooting in the room once people start trying to use it. The solution that we came up with to both of these problems is that we developed a workshop using Git and GitHub for version control and collaboration through the website interface. This workshop contains no installations, so we didn't have to do very much troubleshooting during the workshop, no complicated security protocols to try to teach people how to do, a detailed version of the Git jargon that's transferable between the command line and this interface, and hands-on walkthroughs using the GitHub web interface to upload files, commit changes, fork repositories, make, accept, and resolve pull requests, and collaborate through GitHub issues. So this workshop is meeting researchers where they are and making interoperability possible. So to expand on our current offerings to teach Git, originally we only taught Git from the command line, but now we teach it from several different interfaces, including the web interface, RStudio, and VS Code, which allows people who work in these different systems to collaborate together and not have to worry about using the same software.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, let's go over to the Q&A. We do have one more question. And we have a little bit less than a minute, so I'm going to go ahead and move that question, Marla, if you're okay with that. I think this question is geared towards you, into feed loop and continue the conversation over there. But thank you all so much for your wonderful presentations. Thank you for being here, and we will see you at the next session.
And the next session is our first time attendees and new members social hour. So time for a little bit of chit chat. And if you're new here, then please be sure to check it out. Thanks.